Yes, here we are, Simon. So you've been digging in. What have you found out about JNT then? Any good news?
So this week's star is just dedicated totally to a little bit of background about John Nathan Turner. This is interesting for Dan and I, at least, because so much of John Nathan Turner's early life was spent in Birmingham, in and around Birmingham in the West Midlands, where Dan and I just both happen to be located. So this is very familiar to you and I, Dan. John was born as John Turner on the 12th of August, 1947, on the Perry Common Road in Erdington, which is in Birmingham. Which, for anybody who certainly is maybe out of the UK, Birmingham is literally right in the heart of the United Kingdom. It's right there in the very middle. And is that actually Perry Common Road? Do we know? Have you actually managed to locate it there on the left?
I don't know that, but it is the general feel and look of Erdington, and it's still kind of like that, isn't it? It's still a little leafy. It's still laid out. It's still the same place. I recognised it instantly from the various pictures that I saw.
Yeah, Erdington is a lovely part of Birmingham. It's a very posh place, and that's why I don't live there, because I'm not posh enough. And
but that's posher, isn't it, Simon? Got posher.
And John was educated at King Edward VI School in Aston, which is also every bit as posh as it sounds. Aston is again beautiful. It's an area of Birmingham. It's a region of Birmingham, and King Edward VI School is just fantastic. And to say Birmingham, right in the heart of the United Kingdom, which is it's known as Central England, but it's right in the middle of the United Kingdom. There we go. There it is. And actually, I'm just looking on that map. Yeah, you can just about make out Lichfield, I think, on there, just to the north of where I live now. So you can see how close I am to Birmingham. But John, yes, as I say, he was educated at school in Aston. He knew very early on, actually, that he wanted to be an actor. That was his early ambition, was to be an actor. Sadly, his A-levels were not very good, and he didn't get on the university course that he wanted to. So he controversially decided against spending 3 years doing a degree that he didn't particularly want to do, and instead decided I'm just going to get a job in that case. I'm going to get a job in the theatre, because that's how John was. He was just a go-getter. So he decided to get a job in the theatre, which he did at the Alexandra Theatre in Birmingham. This is all Birmingham.
It's changed.
The Alexandra that you're looking there on the right, that obviously is the new Alexandra.
Right.
Well, that's actually not the brand new one. That's been knocked down, and there's a new frontage completely again since. So this is the one I think that was put up in the 70s, maybe.
70s, yeah, something like that. But inside JT, on the left-hand side, it hasn't changed that much on the inside. Obviously, they've given it a lick of gold paint here and there so often, but it's very, very, if you were to go to the Alex today, it's very recognizable to exactly how it was when John was working in it, and he got an assistant stage manager job there, which allowed him to do small acting roles as well as working behind the scenes. So he was scratching both itches. And what I love about this is I only found this out years later, actually, that just around the corner, literally, and anybody that wants to come and do a trip around Birmingham, you should have been doing it a couple of weeks ago with all the Commonwealth Games on, because the vibe here was phenomenal. But it's still not too late. Come down to Birmingham, you can still see the bull in Centenary Square, I think it's parked at the fantastic bull from the opening sequence, from the opening ceremony. And just around the corner from the Alex Theatre, literally behind it, is the Victoria Pub. And this
another landmark as well, isn't it?
It's a wonderful, wonderful pub. And you can see again that the picture on the right there actually is taken very, very recently. So you can see it hasn't changed at all. It's still magnificent inside as well.
A listed building, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah.
It's a listed building, isn't it? That's why,
It is a listed building. And so, I would highly recommend, if you're going to come down to Birmingham, go and check out the Victoria, because that's where John would go and drink after work. Because the Alex, as you're looking at the photos, the Alex Theatre where they're working is literally just to the left of that photo.
Because there's a sort of walkway that goes across the road into the main theatre itself from the front office, isn't there? And it's very, very strange when you first see it.
Correct.
We're talking about central Birmingham now, and central Birmingham pubs. Now, we do have, I think that's an ideal point to bring on our other panellists. Yes, she's here, and she was actually in Birmingham, out socialising.
Nice you put me there.
But she is.
Did you right the first time?
She's back. It's lovely to see her, and she's dressed the part too. Welcome back, Shah from Geek Ramble.
Oh no, I haven't got one now. What a waste. Hi, I'm so
Good to
sorry
see
I'm so late. Hi, everyone.
All recovered now.
I don't know, I'm just going to have to accept that the whole drinking thing is just going to be my thing. But this is actual water.
Yeah, right.
Keep hydrated. Keep hydrated. Do you know Birmingham very well, Paul?
In the correct way, as happened in the 80s, you've crashed the party. So well done.
Well, 80s style, great.
You've crashed in
Paul,
late. Well done.
Do you know Birmingham very well?
Yeah, I did a few things there. I've done some shows there as well in the past. But yeah, it's and I went for meetings about years ago about a possible revival of Crossroads there. It was a long time ago, that one.
Another one.
Whoa.
I remember when they brought back Crossroads last time. I remember it was just before Doctor Who came back, and I said to lots of people, JT, I said, look, if Crossroads can come back, Doctor Who can come back. But I can't recommend. Have you been to the Victoria, Shah? Do you know this pub?
I think I stumbled past it at one point. Yeah.
She's
I've
been
been in it. It's lovely.
I have.
Yeah.
I've been many times. I used to live in the Victoria for a while in the centre of town, and
But it's supposed to be frequented, isn't it, Simon? By lots of the actors and the people who work at the theatre will obviously once they've knocked off, they will drift in there and drown their sorrows.
You can 100% guarantee that after any show at the Alex, that is exactly where you'll find all of the cast and crew. They'll be all in the Victoria. Having a drink, so it's a wonderful place to go, and it's a beautiful pub inside.
What was
Theatre
the
people going to a pub after a show? I've never heard of it.
Was there a strong connection then between? Was it easy to make your way from theatre to television the way that JNT obviously inevitably did?
Well, no, not really at that point. I mean, what happened to him basically? He started. You just mentioned Crossroads, of course, because Crossroads was made in Birmingham, and JNT did extras roles on Crossroads. He managed to get the odd extras role on Crossroads, and it was around about this time that John Turner turned his name to John Nathan Turner, doing the corruption of Jonathan Turner into John Nathan Turner, because there was already a John Turner who was an actor, and so at this point John still thought he was going to make his way as an actor. Changed his name, but in his own words, he suddenly realised actually that as he described himself, he was a good amateur, but he was not a very good professional actor, and he realised it just was never going to work out, being the pragmatist that he was. And so that was it. He decided, okay, I'm giving it on up. I'm going to move on. And again, just being the go-getter that John was, he decided, right, okay, then I'll just go and work for the BBC. And that's what he did. He applied, and his first main job really was in BBC London as a floor assistant. Actually, earlier on in the chat, I noticed the wonderfully titled Scottish Davros and Friends Wrestle with Pop Culture. Rocket, I love the name, guys.
That's the new name for Daniel Leach, I should point out.
Daniel.
I love it, Daniel.
Oh, it is. I'm
Brilliant,
seeing
isn't
the
it?
photo now. It's Daniel Leach. Well done, Daniel. Good name. Anyway, yeah, you asked, was he a floor manager in the 60s? He absolutely was. That's what he did. He went off to the BBC in London, became a floor assistant in 1968. And of course, then, as Paul was just mentioning, he worked on Doctor Who in the Space Pirates. That was his first Doctor Who role, was in 1969 on Space Pirates. But as we can see also from these photos, he did loads and loads of stuff in the 70s. Throughout the 70s, that was his decade of doing so many different roles. He worked on Basil Brush, as we can see there, the Pallisers, which is boxed on your screen at the moment. And that, of course,
my first job at the BBC was on Basil Brush in '79.
Cool.
I animated the title sequence. And,
Really?
Oh, wow.
Cool. They were filming it. The show was actually filmed at Pebble Mill in Birmingham, but all the titles were done in the East Tower, which is where
I love Basil.
like Jack and
I've got the
Rory
puppet.
and Blue Peter and all that
Have you
stuff.
really?
Paul, you always drop out these little nuggets of various things that you've done across books and TV. It's quite extraordinary. But yeah, Basil Brush means a lot to a lot of people even now, doesn't it?
Mortgage somehow.
Yeah. But
I actually have one I use as a feather duster. I do. I use his tail as a feather
We need to
duster.
do a stream about Basil Brush in the future.
We should do
those days of the BBC were the very kind of, you could go to the BBC, you could work your way up at the BBC, but not today, though. I don't think it doesn't work that way today.
Kelly says here, Simon, The Palaces is still one of her favourite shows ever. I owned it on VHS, and now I've got it on Blu-ray. So it's a more popular show than I was certainly aware of.
Oh, it's huge.
Absolutely, and let's not forget that it was on The Palaces that John first met Anthony Ainley, who then he cast as the Master specifically because of having worked with him on The Palaces. So we've got him to thank for that. And of course, there on the right hand side, of course, then is All Creatures, which is the main thing he was doing when he then really started to branch out within the BBC. And All Creatures was that was through All Creatures that I first met John Nathan Turner, which I have mentioned before now, when there was a charity cricket match for All Creatures Great and Small up in Yorkshire in 1978, or might have been 79, could even have been as late as 80, I don't know. But of course that was the one where John first started to get the idea of having Peter Davison in cricket whites as the Fifth Doctor, and so I remember seeing John Nathan Turner at that event before. So I think that was before he worked on Doctor Who. But I say, his first Doctor Who role was in Space Pirates in 1969, again as a floor assistant, and then as assistant floor manager, he moved on to Ambassadors of Death and Colony in Space. But I say, the Space Pirates was his first foray into Doctor Who. And then it was in 1977 that he became production unit manager on season 15, at the same time as really starting work on All Creatures Small as well. And
it wasn't unusual, was it? Simon, it wasn't unusual, was it, for staff to move across these shows, whatever genre they were, and sometimes, just as Paul said, some of them could have been filmed at Pebble Mill, some of them could have been at Television Centre. They would literally go anywhere, wouldn't they?
Well, what we've got to remember, as we've talked about in the past, is that the BBC was a very, very different, and much better, in my opinion, beast to what it is nowadays, because it just had this enormous vault of talent and talented people, and so many different departments all working. And so, yes, all these hugely talented people were constantly crisscrossing backwards and forwards across different productions. And so you had a pool. You simply had a pool. At that time, I think the biggest pool of talent in the entire world at that point, maybe Walt Disney Studios beat it. I don't know. It's questionable, and so that's why you would find yourself working on so many different productions. That's why everybody from
Peter Harrington has outed himself here.
Managers, whatever.
Peter Harrington's outed himself here as another Basil Brush fan, everybody. I'm getting a warm and cosy feeling talking about all this, and it's not just the weather. We've got a comment here from Digby Strawbridge here, who's looking at those pictures of Birmingham and says, would the panel ever consider doing a field trip to places like this? You know what? I think... What do you think, Sean?
Absolutely, I would love it.
Really have to ask.
We could actually do a pub crawl. That'd be fantastic.
So I'm gonna say I went in a couple of places with you, didn't I? And when you were in town, was it last year? Sometimes went to a few pubs.
Was it last year Christmas? No, the year before. Yeah, before.
In the run up to that. So it's possible we may get some sort of mobile recording devices on the go.
Yeah, we will.
It's down the road for you and me now.
I think this has got to happen.
It's got to happen.
I think this has absolutely got to happen, and we will get a Basil Brush. We'll bring him along somehow. We'll get one of those puppets on there.
I think Sarah's put
I'll bring mine over.
Type 40 con, definitely. Type 40 con.
How much do we need to pitch in all for each for Matt's flight?
The classic fanboy. Carl is up for a guided tour here. Yeah, I think it would. Yeah. So the producership, though, Simon. I mean, how did it? It couldn't have just dropped into his lap, could it? He was floating around from show to show to show. So who tapped him for it?
Well, to a large extent, really, we've got Graham Williams to thank for it because it was due. He started, as I say, John started work regularly on season 15 with Horror of Fang Rock, and actually, then the Horror of Fang Rock, which opens season 15, it then begins an entirely unbroken run of stories for John Nathan Turner to have worked on the program right up until Survival at the very, very end. So, from Horror of Fang Rock in 77 onwards, he worked on every Doctor Who story that existed after that point. And because he'd been working as production unit manager for some time by this point, by the end of the 70s, Graham Williams actually wanted to take him on as assistant producer for series 17. And the Sixth Floor denied that, said, no, you can't do that, Graham, sorry, you're on your own. And so that's how John Nathan Turner continued then as production unit manager on season 17. So then it was kind of logical that once Graham was going, who are we going to use? We're obviously going to use the person that Graham wanted to have as an assistant producer and has been there acting in a producing capacity on series 17. So actually he did kind of almost fall into it, which almost sounds like we're sort of doing him a disservice by saying it was accidental that he fell into it. Of course, that's not true. He was damn good at what he was doing, and that's why Graham wanted to take him on as an assistant.
He was the natural guy to go to. Then is that what you feel?
Absolutely,
Simon,
yeah.
Can you just explain the sixth floor to me and Shaw?
The sixth floor basically is literally that. It is the sixth. It was. We talk in the past tense here. It was the sixth floor, literally the sixth floor of BBC Television Centre, which was the concrete dome as you know it. And so that was basically where all of the upper echelon lived.
Big wigs
were
the decision makers.
I'm trying to look for words, Ian, and I can't. Bigwigs, yeah. The people who made the hiring and firing decisions, they would be the ones. So it was up to the sixth floor, for example, that Dear John Nathan Turner went in '85 when it was being decided as to whether the show would continue or not. So he would be summoned literally to the sixth floor. The BBC weren't stupid. They knew what they're doing with their physical hierarchy. And you would go up to the sixth floor if you were invited up there. And you'd either be praised or you had to have your program axed.
That's a good point to actually ask Paul. Paul, tell us a little bit about the reputation that the sixth floor had when you were there.
It was still men in suits and ties, and very much sort of like, you know, the hierarchy and all that sort of thing. I mean, when I joined the BBC, I first went for an interview in '78 because I decided not to go to. I was offered a place at university doing art and design, and I turned it down because I moved to London from the Staffordshire Moorlands, where my parents were living, and. It was a case of like, well, you haven't got your Bachelor of Arts degree, so you can't go and work in the art department, and you can't work in design because you haven't got a Bachelor of Arts degree. So that they found me work in what was laughingly called the animation, but it was rostrum cameras, and I worked my way up from rostrum cameras up to doing lots of other things and getting into through the back door that way. But I had a meeting with like men in suits, and they were all very proper and everything, but they were blown away by the portfolio, and it was the drive and the work that enabled me to do that.
So they did recognise talent when it came their way. They did recognise raw talent,
which is, I think, very much what happened with John. You know, that they like to nurture, whereas now it's a case of not so much nurture, but if you fit certain categories,
that's what it is today.
Without going too much into great detail, it's a case of like, oh, you've done a degree in PR, so you can become a head of a department at such and such or something like that. I mean, I've be careful what I said. I've just finished a contract for the BBC, anyways.
I had somebody the Suits visited me when I was doing Top of the Pops, and I didn't even realize there was, and that's when that people were saying, yeah, it's the people from the 6th floor. Oh, yeah. So I was doing the graphics Top of the Pops, and they came in and they just stood behind me, and I was really nervous because everybody kept saying to me, if the people from the 6th floor comes and sees you, then you're in trouble. But I think they were just overlooking what was happening in Top of the Pops and what I was doing. But they didn't say anything to me. They just stood in the background like Darth Vader, you know, like just in a silhouette, just standing there looking. And I just got really nervous. So anyway,
a bit like Matt Pott there, who we can.
Yeah. Actually, he was one of them. Yeah.
Of course, this all culminated, didn't it, with him getting his hands on the best show on British TV, really, and inheriting the leading man of Tom Baker, wasn't it, Simon? Obviously, he'd worked with him in that capacity, as you said. He'd been on the show since Fang Rock. It does make you wonder: did they clash immediately? What were the pressing concerns that John found when he took the reins of this show? Because Tom was probably more proprietorial of it than Graham Williams was. Is how history would have you believe, wouldn't it?
I think it's probably fair to say that they clashed probably almost from day one. Wow. It's difficult because, of course, Tom Baker came back for Series 18, having been doing promotion in Australia, and actually came back not very well. He came back very run down, very tired, very exhausted. And so he was already kind of at a low ebb, if that makes sense. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Yeah. And John, of course, was very much on the ascension at that point. John would have been just so enthusiastic to just jump in straight away and get cracking. Whereas Tom was literally was 6 years into the role at this point. So it was kind of, he peaked probably personally and was just physically tired. And so I think they were probably almost going in two completely different directions at that point in time. John was going up, and Tom was probably kind of going down a little way.
I think.
But I think they probably clashed almost immediately.
Sorry, Paul. What was that?
The clashing came about was that John wanted to put his own stamp on the show from day one, and he wanted to get away from the sort of puerile humour that had happened in the season before, which was very much down to Tom and Douglas Adams together on all that, which, you know, can't decry the talent that was Douglas Adams at all. An amazing writer, amazing man. But with script editing and Doctor Who, it just became, especially with the budget and everything back in those days, it just became a little bit cheesy, to say the least. Some of the stories were good, but some of them, you know, not so good. I mean, Bob hated the mandrels, the way the mandrels were made, because they were done on the cheap. They were made by the costume department and not by the special effects or the to sculpt monster masks or anything. You know, they were made on a Singer sewing machine, and you can tell by the looks of them. They're like I said they reminded me of football mascots. You know, the actual costumes. That was the first Doctor Who that I was on the set of, was Nightmare of Eden. But with those sort of factors, John wanted to put a stamp on it for the title sequence, the look of the show, the way the show was shot, the way it was directed, the way it was written, and the way the characterizations changed and everything, and even the look of Tom's costume and everything. He wanted to make it look much more astute and adult, which it was losing what it had gained throughout the 60s and early to mid 70s.
So from your position as somebody in the industry, Paul, and somebody who say had been there on the set for that, when you returned to the set, did you notice a marked difference once John had taken over?
Oh yes, you could see a difference, because on the set of Nightmare of Eden, it's a bad example because everything was kicking off, and it wasn't a very pleasant set. It wasn't a very happy company at all. But it was farcical, and obviously there was two camps. You know, there was of what was going on. I mean, now they embrace their guest stars and co-workers and things, but back in those days there was the leading man and leading lady, and then there was everybody else, you know. But John wanted to break that down and wanted it more family, you know, and you know, as a unit, as a working unit. I mean, he did actually, one of the things that people don't really seem to give him credit for was that he actually made it a nicer workspace and a much more sort of accessible show for people.
Yeah, now you put it like that. It does seem again that he was, if not a visionary Simon, and somebody who was slightly ahead of his time.
I think you really think he was both those things. I think he was a visionary and he was ahead of his time. And the thing that again, we shouldn't take for granted here is that it would have been very, very easy for anybody as a new producer to come in to take over from Graham Williams and do the same kind of thing. Pretty much by that point in the run, the show was very comfortable.
And they obviously knew where it was going to go.
The machine by that point, it was on a production line, and so it would have been very easy for somebody to come in and do more of the same, maybe with a tweak here and a bit of a change there. And we have to give John credit for completely reinventing the show, because look, absolutely. You look at season 18, Meglos aside, we forget that one for a minute, but you look at season 18 and it couldn't be more different. He was a brave man. He could have just carried on as normal, but he didn't. He, as Paul said, he came in, he wanted to give it a kick at the backside and he wanted to change it entirely. And that's exactly what he did. He struggled it was by all accounts it was like wrestling to turn an ocean liner around, but he did it and it's there on screen. That's the key thing. It's there on screen.
It's a good job he did, because we wouldn't be here celebrating it all tonight. With so much to get into, so much to talk about.
Forget that and say
thanks for putting all that together, Simon. Fascinating stuff.
He was
and
vision.
I'll just say happy birthday, John Nathan Turner. And we're gonna.
I think Simon's still going.
we're having a few sound issues there with Simon, but I think he'll reconnect with us in a short while. But happy birthday, John Nathan Turner, and thanks for putting all that together as always. There, Simon, with the Doctor Who diary. Let's head.